everyone, and welcome to the How Do I Knit That podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Dawn of Sarah Dawn's Designs, and this 14th episode of the How Do I Knit That podcast is all about being a productive crafter. It's how to make the most of your crafting time, how to keep yourself focused so you actually finish that big project, how to keep yourself from being distracted by all the pretty yarns, tools, and patterns on the various corners of the crafty internet, and how to deal with what often seems like an ever growing to do list, especially for us folks who are knit and crochet designers. So, broadly, what is this podcast all about? Well, this podcast came about because I hear so many people saying, "Oh, I could never knit that. Oh, I could never make that." And I think that's really sad. I'm a firm believer in the idea that anyone can knit or quilt or crochet or whatever your chosen art is. All it takes is some knowledge, the right tools, the right techniques, and the willingness to get a little ingenious. If you're looking for the previous podcast episodes, you can find them on my Patreon, which I will link to in the description, or in a YouTube playlist, which I will also link to in the description. Let's start with an important point. Do you need to be a productive crafter? I use the term productive in air quotations here because it really means something different to different people. It can be anything from finishing one sweater for your significant other to turning out over 100 hats for charity. I know someone who's done the latter and they are amazingly prolific. But generally, I'd say no, you don't have to be a productive crafter. Crafting, in many ways, is sort of antithetical to the idea that everything we do has to be productive and produce something of use in an efficient manner. Knitting a sweater or crocheting a shawl may be wonderful, but it's not efficient. The old annoying refrain of, "but I can get it at a big box store," holds very true in this case. It's far more efficient for us, as the end users, to simply go out and buy a blanket if we wanted one. Crafters don't craft for straight efficiency, even those of us who make this our jobs. We craft because we enjoy it, because we value the objects, the skill, and the time that went into it. And we definitely don't do it for the money. The finances of this industry could and should be their own podcast episode. Let's flip this though, because sometimes we, as crafters, have deadlines. Whether it's a gift you're knitting for a holiday, inventory for a craft show, a sample knit for a magazine, a test knit for a designer, or more, sometimes we absolutely must get the crafting done by a specific date. And so, in that sense, then yes, we must be productive crafters. You can't see me, but I've got the air quotes around the word productive again because honestly, I really don't like that descriptor, but can't come up with a better one. So, how do we do it? How do we keep ourselves focused and organized to actually finish the things? Well, before I get into this, full disclosure, I haven't gotten this all worked out myself. There's stuff that is running late in my own corners of the internet, and I have entire boxes of works in progress that I will come back to one day. But I've gotten better than I was a few years ago. Hard to believe, I know. And as someone with a disability that impacts the parts of the brain that deals exactly with this stuff, organizational skills, time awareness and management, executive functioning, and other things, I've developed a few coping mechanisms over the years that I'm happy to share. 1. How much does it actually matter? We've all heard stories of the well-meaning friend or family member who's making a baby blanket for a newly expectant parent. They don't finish the blanket before the baby is born. The horror! But is it really that bad if the baby gets the blanket at 6 months or a year old? Probably not. Sure, it's disappointing that it wasn't finished when you wanted it to be, but there's no really huge, horrible consequence. And the child will still be happy with a nice squishy blanket, and the parents will hopefully be grateful for a handmade gift, no matter when it's actually gifted. Learn how long that pattern takes and adjust for the next time you make it. That's all. But if you're a knit/crochet designer and you're sample knitting for a magazine, it had better be close to something to an act of God before you miss those deadlines. The only magazine deadline I've ever missed was a deadline where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. There were postage delays in getting me the yarn, And then, during my sample knitting, both of our kitties got very sick, and we were doing multiple vet trips a week. Both kitties, sadly, were old ladies and passed away within a week of each other. It was a very hard 2 weeks, and I had no time for knitting. Emailing the magazine and asking for an extension was one of the hardest things I had to do because A, I was already an emotional wreck as I'd had my cat for 14 years, and B, because I knew not only could they just say, nope, we're not working with you anymore, we're not paying you, please return the yarn, bye, but also, as a designer, deadlines are your reputation. If you get a reputation for not turning stuff in on time, you'll never get invited to work with magazines again. Luckily, said magazine was amazingly understanding, and it all did work out in the end. And now we have two new shelter kitties who have their forever homes with us. Most deadlines will fall somewhere into those two extremes. And to help you balance that ever growing to do list, well, figuring out which deadlines are well meaning but probably flexible versus something that must absolutely 100% be done on time will help you out quite a bit. Okay, so once we figure out how much this deadline actually matters, then we can develop some skills to figure out how to approach it. First, have your tools. What do I mean by this? I mean, have your yarn, hook, needles, scissors, everything already at hand before you start the project, and keep them with the project as much as possible. This also means reading through the pattern and making sure you have all the notions. Nothing derails a project more, well, at least for me, than finding out that I needed a zipper length I don't have, or that I don't have enough matching buttons in my button jar. Even just an "oh crap, where did I put my scissors" moment can derail my progress immensely. To keep things with their associated projects, project bags and yarn bowls are amazingly useful, but if you don't have one, don't despair. You can use plastic grocery bags, paper bags, or reusable canvas bags as well. Second, get an estimate of how long you think it will take to make the thing. I make those estimates using past patterns with similar yardage, yarn weight, and style, though, of course, it's not 100% accurate. I used to use Toggle to record when I was working on things, but I found that I kept forgetting to turn Toggle on, and it was cumbersome to use when I was out and about, as the mobile version didn't always sync correctly with the desktop version. So I stopped using that and started relying on estimates from previous projects. These can still be wildly inaccurate, but it's always better to overestimate than underestimate. So if you're unsure, add more time. Don't forget to account for things like finishing and blocking. Plus, if the finished object's going in the mail, add the expected mailing time into your estimate. If it's going to need to be photographed, don't forget about that taking time too. 3. Schedule. Use something to keep track of your projects when they're due, when you need to have the various steps done, and so on. I use Google Calendar because you can set notifications on it, and for me, having my tablet ding at me and tell me, hey, you have this thing that needs to be done in a week is a godsend. Other people report better luck with a bullet journal or a physical planner. Find something that you will use and reference, and then use it. Psst! If you like physical planners, definitely poke the crafting planner from the amazing folks at Craftic. There's a link in the description for that. And no, you don't necessarily need a separate crafting journal. My work calendar is linked to my personal calendar. This means that I can see when I have personal, non-crafting things happening, and also when I have blocks of time that I can just dedicate to just getting stuff done. Other folks find that they do, in fact, need a separate journal for their crafts. Experiment and find out what works right for you. And whatever your scheduling style, have somewhere to write down your actual project notes. What needle size you used, what row you stopped on, how many stitch repeats of the pattern you're supposed to do, and so on. I use a combination of Bcount, an Android-only stitch counts and notes app, and Google Docs for this. Google Docs is searchable, which helps amazingly. But again, use whatever works for you. Just be sure to write stuff down as you work. Okay, so once you've gotten yourself organized, then comes the second part of the trip, actually doing the things you know you need to do. But before I get into that, I want to remind folks about why I created this podcast. I intend to talk about all sorts of knitting, crocheting, and crafting stuff so that you can create amazing things in whatever situation you're in. Remember, you can, in fact, knit that. And when I say knit that, I also mean crochet that or spin that. It applies to pretty much any craft I can think of. And for those things to talk about, I'll be relying on you, my listeners and audience. I want to hear what keeps you from knitting or crocheting. and I'll try and address the barriers you mentioned. It can be anything at all. I'll at least try and give you some advice. If you're having trouble with a particular technique, are wondering how to knit with limited or no time, or can't find tools that work for you, please reach out and I'll try and address your concern on the podcast. I'll even do pattern support, provided the pattern is free online and accessible to me, or one I can find at my local library. And of course, I'm able to answer questions about my own designs as well. You can submit your questions by email and have them be read on the show, or you can submit an MP3 voice recording and I'll play it on the podcast. So, with that reminder, let's keep moving and talk about how to actually keep your focus and do the things you plan to do. There's a bunch of different techniques. Now, honestly, this is a system that doesn't work as well for me because it can often cause me a lot of anxiety. So then I just run away and don't finish the thing. But for other folks with ADHD or other issues around executive functioning and organization, having this accountability can be super helpful. Just so long as it's gentle accountability. This is supposed to be helpful, not a cause of more anxiety and more stress. Even just joining a local knit night so that people will see you working and ask about your projects can be enough for some folks. And there are lots and lots of virtual knitting circles happening on Zoom and other online platforms. Shameless plug, I've got a virtual knit night of my own I host for patrons over on Patreon. Join link for that is in the description. Second, cut distractions. Now, obviously, life can absolutely be a distraction. We all have stuff that we have to do that isn't crafting, and it's bad form to completely ignore the other people you might live with. Plus, sometimes the kids or the cat might just demand your attention. But if you have the space, make yourself a dedicated crafting nook. Make a signal or a sign that tells people you're working on something and not to bug you if it's not important. If you have a home office or a spare bedroom, turn that into a space where you can close the door. If not, even just saying, hey, this chair is my crafting chair, makes a huge difference. Digital distractions, on the other hand, are much easier and much harder to tame. On the one hand, social media, video games, and mobile games actually employ some pretty wild user psychology to try and bring us back for one more level or just stay for 5 more minutes. The platforms and apps that can hold our attention for hours are designed to do just that. This can make it very challenging to break away from doom scrolling Twitter or Instagram, or to step away from, but I just need one more level in the latest MMO. And distractions are just a click away, be they Netflix, TikTok, or the newest app on your phone. What do you do? Well, there are two parts to this. How do you get into focus, and how do you keep yourself from being distracted? Let's tackle part one. How do you get into focus? Well, that can depend on a number of things. Many people report great success with turning on something like Netflix, a podcast, or an audiobook and simply knitting or crochet along while they watch or listen to their media. This, for me at least, works wonders for simple projects, but not so much for anything that requires me to pay attention to the pattern. For projects where I have to pay attention, complex lace, cables, etc., I use Brain FM. See, Brain FM actually uses specialized music to alter your brainwaves to help you get into those focus states for creative work or deep work. They also have options for sleep and relaxation too. Think I'm out of my mind? Please, bear with me for a moment. We've known that music can alter brains and brainwaves for a bit now. This was simplistically the broad basis for the have your baby listen to Mozart idea that was later debunked, as music can stimulate different brainwaves and help the brain form connections between neurons. Brain FM just takes this to the next level by using music that targets specific brainwaves associated with different states, creativity, relaxation, etc. And yes, when I first heard about this, I was skeptical, but I tried it out, and honestly, it's one of the best tools I've found as an adaptive tool for my disability. I get into and out of hyperfocus faster, and their guided sleep meditations have yet to fail to knock me out. I turn those on when I just can't sleep, and they work very, very well for me. I admit to being curious about the specifics of their science. I've linked a page that has some of Brain FM's studies in the description, and it's really quite fascinating. Also, they use the concept of salience, that is, understanding and predicting sounds at a conscious and subconscious level, to help the user tune out distractions. I'll get to more about tuning out and blocking distractions in a moment. If you want to hear a few tracks for free, you can do so on Brain FM's YouTube channel, also linked in the description. And if you decide Brain FM is for you, there's a purchase link in the description as well. Making a purchase of Brain FM through that link helps support the podcast and the other stuff I do. So that's a little bit about getting into focus. Now, once you're in focus, how do you stay there? Well, beyond the distraction blocking magic of Brain FM's music, I use one of a series of software that are designed as focus apps. They're apps and programs that let you control your digital distractions. There are lots of them, but the one that I use is FocusMe. It can block applications, programs, individual websites, and higher level domains, and more. Admittedly, it's not the most intuitive to set up, but once set up, you've got oodles of customization and how you want to structure your block list. I have mine set that I get 10 minutes on most social media sites before it boots me off, and I have to wait 1 minute before I can open them back up again. I also have some specific sites auto-blocked. I wouldn't recommend this to auto-block Ravelry or other seizure-inducing sites, though, as sometimes the sites do fully load before being closed. And for a while, I had it set to block me out of all work things after 7 p.m., which majorly cut back on my late night working sessions. Now, I don't have that plan enabled anymore because I mostly manage to log out, so to speak, of my work after about 7 p.m. If I find that becomes an issue again, then I can just set up that plan again. But yes, you can block video games, distracting phone apps, Netflix, both the app and the website, and more. And you get on apps and URLs very easily. So when you realize that something is eating your time, that you really needed to be working on that sweater instead, it's a very easy process to add an app or URL to the block list. I did have one serious issue with them, but their customer service was super fast about it and very efficient, so full points there. What did I learn? That you can go into the settings and set it so you can't kill Focus Me with the Task Manager. Unfortunately, when Focus Me glitched out one day, I couldn't kill it with the Task Manager. So, unless you find yourself needing that level of lockout, I do suggest you turn that particular setting off. But what I really do love, you can set a schedule. Say you want to block social media during your workday, or you want to remind yourself to take breaks while playing video games. You can set it as password protected or not, depends on how much self control you have. Yes, I have my social media one set behind a password. It's infinitely customizable. There's also an Android version, but the one grumble is that the plans don't sync yet. That's something they're openly working on. There are a lot of people out there who struggle to find the time to craft and get sucked into things like binge watching Netflix or doom scrolling Twitter when they really didn't intend to in the first place. Tools like this help you focus instead on what you want to focus on, not what sneaky psychological tricks trick you into getting distracted by instead. And reclaiming your time in this era of digital distractions is a huge win. Well, anyway, I think that just about wraps up the podcast. A huge thanks to my patrons who've supported this podcast. You folks can submit an MP3 audio or MP4 video file of your questions for the podcast over on Patreon. The podcast archive is available on my Patreon page, which is www.patreon.com/SarahDawnsDesigns, and future episodes will be available here on YouTube as well. Patrons usually get access on the second Wednesday of every other month, and the podcast is available to the public a week after that, so the third Wednesday of every other month. Well, that's it for episode 14. Stay tuned in July 2022 for the next episode, and thank you once again for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and remember, you can, in fact, knit that. Happy crafting!